host. And of course, this is where we find out what is important to our lives. For many of us, we hadn't understood the importance of a DA, but those of us in Atlanta and Fulton County do know what it is when you have a DA that can make a difference, can make a decision, and it's there. But the role of the DA has now come front and center. And it's that time, it's that place, and it's that space that we need experience and individuals who can make a difference in the lives of all of us, we citizens who depend on a DA. Tonight we have DA Paul Howard. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. How are you feeling tonight?
No, it's a wonderful night. I mean, I'm having a beautiful day. I get to see my brother. I don't know that I'd want to be a DA, but you've been at it a while. I think you got the stripes by now,
Yeah.
You get it. You've made some hard calls. Kevin, have you ever met Brother Howard?
I have not, but it's indeed a pleasure.
Yeah. Kevin, great to see you, man. You're working with a great man there.
No, it is a true season. The role of the DA is important. Why is it now even more paramount? You've had to make a couple calls, and I wouldn't just say you had to make a couple calls. You've had to observe calls that required your duty to stand up when others wanted you to sit down. That is what my observation is. They want someone who will sit down. They want somebody who they can buy. They want somebody who they can tell what to do. Why is the role of the DA, and particularly experienced DA, so critical for our community?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. The DA, in my estimation, is the gatekeeper for our criminal justice system. And I think what has happened over the last several months, starting with the death of George Floyd, it's simply become front and center. That when the DA is hesitant or doesn't make a courageous decision, it reflects badly upon our community. And what it allows the police to do is to continue the systematic racism, the biased policing that results in the continuous death of minorities. And so what I have said, Munson, I am going to continue to do the right thing for our community.
That's a tough call for most because they're used to our community pandering. When we think of the Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
No justice.
No justice. And this is what, when you think about Breonna Taylor, people are always saying to us, if you conduct yourself differently, then you can avoid a certain consequence. If you stay out of the wrong places. So if you look at Ahmaud Arbery, he was jogging down the street and the brother got killed. People say that if you don't resist the police, that maybe you won't get killed. You look at George Floyd, man, he offered no resistance. Some people say that if you just run from the police, that maybe you'll be saved. Rayshard Brooks decided to just run for his life, and he ended up with 2 bullets in the back. And Munson, how many times have we heard people say that if you just stay at home, if you just sit in your own house?
Wow.
And Breonna Taylor was sitting in her own house, minding her own business. And they are still trying to get justice in Louisville, Kentucky.
It doesn't appear that anybody's paying fair. Even in, I think you have a race coming up soon. I'm in 30331. So I'm going tomorrow. So, but I want the community to know that the influence by infiltrators into Black DAs is what we're feeling now.
Yeah.
You now have, we've seen it, Gordon Joyner, they darkened him.
That's correct.
And all of a sudden we got flyers and you're 8 shades darker than you were.
Absolutely.
So these interlopers, what are they trying to achieve by taking over Fulton County's DA?
Well, one of the things that I've asked people to do is to look around the country. If you look at Miami, Florida, if you look at Phoenix, Arizona, if you look at Sacramento, California, and probably the best example, unfortunately, is Los Angeles, California, because those are cities where the DA has been endorsed by the police union, and that DA's campaign is being partially funded by the police union. And what has happened in those cities is no policemen get prosecuted. In Los Angeles, according to Mother Jones magazine, since the year 2000, Munson, they've had over 1,800 shootings. The police union has already put $2.2 million in the DA's race. And in Los Angeles, not one police officer has been prosecuted for those 18 shootings. And you're right, that is what they're trying to do in Atlanta. That's why, on one hand, they're complaining about, oh, you know, Mr. Howard, you're taking too long to finish cases. And the next day they're complaining, you're doing them too fast. So what is the right temperature? What's the right speed? They don't have a right speed, because what they're really saying is, we don't want you to do them at all.
So one of the things that has become a prevalent commentary is, why don't we have the police be held to the same laws and standards as those that they're supposed to protect and serve? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, this is something I've said over and over. We should have one system of justice. Shouldn't be one system for the police and one system for the rest of us, because I can tell you one thing that there's nobody in this country can doubt. If Rayshard Brooks shot a policeman in the back twice, Rayshard Brooks would have been arrested on the scene immediately, and nobody would have questioned it at all. But when the roles are reversed, people say, oh, if you charge the policeman, you've rushed to judgment. You've done something political. And I think that that's why people are continuing to march in Portland and Seattle and all over the country, because what they are saying is, we need one system of justice and not a separate one for police.
Now, to that end, as these people continue, and I'm proud of the young people that are on the streets that continue to fight, but as you continue to march, now we have the president and the Justice Department sending in these, for lack of a better term, private militia that don't have badges, don't have to identify themselves, and can essentially rendition civilians. You know, how do you handle something like that? You know, it's not happening in states like Texas, where, you know, they believe in the Second Amendment, right? Where if you jump out of a white van and you have no identifying marks, you may be surprised at what comes back at you. But when people are peacefully protesting and this happens, you know, what do you think around that?
Well, that's why it's so important that you got to elect a DA who's willing to stand up. You notice that they aren't trying to come to Atlanta. Right. They talk about going to Baltimore, and Marilyn Mosby, my sister there, she told them that if they showed up, that she was going to start arresting them. So we've got two things going on. You know, we've got the overt sending of federal officers, but at the same time, right here in our own state, while the funeral for Rayshard Brooks took place at Ebenezer, they were at the Capitol passing a bill, Senate Bill 838, and I believe tomorrow is the last day for the governor to veto that bill. It's a bill that the police unions have gotten passed in 16 states. And what it does, it gives the policemen more rights. And why do they need more protection? I don't know. But it does some things that are really harmful for Georgians. It creates a law called the Intimidation of Police Act, which means if you get arrested or if you have some confrontation with the police, if you say something that the police don't like, you can be charged with a felony. The second thing it does is it allows policemen to sue you if you file a complaint against the policeman and it's not founded to be true. So why is that so dangerous? Because the union has a bevy of lawyers waiting to sue and harass citizens. The other thing it does, if you read the bill very carefully, it seems to outlaw the use of citizen review committees. We've only got one in the state, and that's in Atlanta, but it looks like it might not exist once that bill is passed. So we've got Donald Trump sending in the troops, and we've got the Republicans and the police union sending in legislation. We're getting it from both sides.
And I think it's important that people understand that, this is a concerted tactical stratagem. This is not an accident.
Absolutely. And that's why I say to people, Munson says, going to vote. I say, hey, look, you need to vote right away. You need to vote early. There's no telling what kind of tricks that might go on August the 11th. But go to the polls if you hadn't voted early. Go to the polls on August 11th. Be prepared to stand up all day. We cannot retreat. And we've got to be ready to go and vote in November, because there's still a lot of people counting on the fact that we won't show up on August the 11th and we won't show up on November the 3rd. And we've got to fool them again.
Right.
Ahmaud Arbery had the misfortune of not having a Paul Howard. So our community missed out. Our young people who were at Spelman and Morehouse, thank God they had a Paul Howard. So the role of the DA for our young people and having you in office, what are you committed to that people may not have heard that they need to understand, because you've been there for this community?
Well, what I don't think people understand is this is not something new for us. We've prosecuted our first case back in 2002. I'm sure you remember the case involving Corey Ward, 19-year-old Black man. He was shot in his driving an SUV because the policeman thought the SUV was stolen. As it turns out, the SUV belonged to his mother. We investigated the case, and about 2 years into the investigation, we were able to get his own partner to admit that Corey Ward didn't try to run over him, didn't hit him, and that officer had influenced his partner to lie. The case was indicted, and unfortunately, that was one of the first occasions that a white officer was held responsible for killing a Black man. The case was indicted, went to our Fulton County Superior Court, and one of our Fulton County Superior Court judges gave him immunity. And I know you're aware that that's one of the things that we've got to change. We've got to get rid of the qualified immunity, the sovereign immunity as it applies to a police officer, because that officer not only was given immunity for his criminal activity by the judge, he was given civil immunity as well. So he got off scot-free. After we did that case, the next case that people will probably remember is Katherine Johnston, 92 years old, in her own home. Policeman came in, shot her, and then they made up a big lie about what had happened. Those officers pled guilty. And it was, I believe, in the history of our state, one of the first times that an officer was held responsible for killing a Black person in the state of Georgia. And so since that time, we've prosecuted about 38 other cases involving police misconduct. And every time that we've done it, we've gotten the same complaint from the police union. They always claim that you rushed to judgment and it was political. So what we're hearing about Rayshard Brooks is not new to my ears, because that is always the complaint. You probably also, Munson, remember that before I took office, it was not unusual for 15 or 20 Black men to get killed every year by the police, 15 to 20. The number now has dropped to 3. That's still way too many. But we've made drastic improvements in our community. What I've said to people is Rayshard Brooks ought to be the last one. We got to make him the last one. And we have the power to do that. And that's why I'm asking people to put me back in office, because I'm not obliged to the police union. That's the only way we can get this problem solved.
You know, it is wonderful to have you here, but you've done some innovative things there inside the DA's office. Maybe individuals don't know how you have innovated the whole system there. Why don't you share a couple of facts just so that they'll know?
Well, let me mention two things that probably people point out to us as innovative. One is our conviction integrity unit. We put together a unit. The young lady who operates the unit was the founder of the Innocence Project in the state of Georgia. We've got a 5-person citizen committee, and what we do is we review convictions from our own office to determine whether or not they are just. They review them, and if it appears that the conviction is unjust because of DNA or fingerprints or something that we can prove, which shows that that person is innocent, then I will gladly sign a document asking our Superior Court to undo that conviction. The other thing that we're doing is we're looking at sentences that are unreasonable. And as you probably know, the first person that we exonerated was a man by the name of Darrell Hall. Darrell was convicted in September of 1991 for the possession of less than 2 grams of cocaine, and he was sentenced to life in prison because he had 2 prior offenses. When I saw that, I presented a document to our Superior Court. They signed it, and Mr. Hill was exonerated. But once he got out of jail, what he said to me was what so many Black men have said to me, Black men and women: I'm out of jail now, Mr. Howard, but I need a job. And that's when Tyler Perry came in, gave him a job in his landscape department. I had a report about a week ago. Mr. Hill is doing well. And it just says that we have to provide other opportunities for people who are getting out of prison. The other thing that we're working on, we started a project called Level Up, and it's a juvenile recidivism project. We're looking at juveniles that have been arrested 3 times. And what we're trying to do is to supply significant intervention so that they won't get arrested a 4th time. Our data indicates that those are the juveniles, 88% of them, who end up in the adult court. So what we're doing is to try to make sure they don't get that 4th arrest so that they won't end up in our adult system. So those are the kinds of things that we've been able to do to try to make it better and safer for our community.
Kevin, you have anything else?
Yeah, I do. First of all, let me just express my appreciation for your integrity in this position, and and your honor and the honor that you display in going about your business every day. Because as much as we'd like to say this is the norm, my experience in working in all 50 states, it's not the norm. And to that, I want to extend my gratitude. That being said, the conviction integrity unit, research, the unreasonable sentencing, and the Level Up program, great programs. I remember a time when prison was designed to rehabilitate. These programs sort of counter the fact that it's no longer that. Is there a movement afoot to try to get it back to the days where it was about rehabilitation and not just about discarding Black and brown people?
Well, one of the things that I am asking the community to do is to help me help our court system to reform. And this is one of the things that we must do. When I started as DA, we had about 4,800 people in the Fulton County Jail. We put together a process called the complaint room. We reduced it to 2,400. I believe that we can reduce the jail's population by another 1,000 by using something called a case processing standard. What that standard says is once the DA charges you, there's a certain number of days that the case has to be over with or the case gets dismissed. That's what they use in other jurisdictions. We don't do it here. Well, Kevin, let me tell you, if we can cut the population by 1,000, that means that we can save about $30 million. That's the $30 million that we should use to fund and seed some of the programs that you're talking about. Because as we all know, it's always been tough to fund these programs. Now, because of the virus, tax dollars are going to be even less. We've got to figure out a way to use some of the current funding to make sure that some of the programs that you're talking about, others are talking about, projects that have to do with reentry, that we've got to figure out a way to fund them. And I think the best way to fund them in Fulton County is to stop housing unnecessarily so many people in the jail whose cases ought to be over with.
Super. Well, we thank you for your dedication. I look forward to going and voting tomorrow. And we look forward to you continuing to serve us as the DA. So thank you very much to Paul Howard for coming to a seat at the table.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Hey, Kevin. Reform. How you see it playing out? What do you see next on our agenda for our community as it relates to reform?
Well, I can tell you, man, having run the largest prison to work program in the state of Nevada, reform is certainly needed. The days of dropping black and brown people off at a bus stop with an ankle monitor and $25 and good luck wishes have to be over. And I feel like as long as these brothers and sisters and our allies stay in the streets and keep pushing for change, that we're going to see some change. And frankly, I heard Ava DuVernay talking the other day, the time of incremental change is over. I mean, it's been 400 years. I don't know how much more time you want us to be comfortable waiting for people to get ready to help and make change. It's time for change now.
Cool. Well, that was enough said there. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to A Seat at the Table. Thanks to my phenomenal co-host, Kevin, and thanks to DA Paul Howard for coming on, explaining both the role of the DA and the changes that he and other DAs who are modern are approaching to remove the shackles and the injustice on those and level the playing field so there's justice for all. You do not have to be in the streets, but you do have to be in the struggle. I'm Munson Steve. You're watching A Seat at the Table. See you tomorrow. Thanks, Kevin.